I'm not going to assume any knowledge of Aston Martin, so I'm going to take you through a little bit of the basics. Why are we called Aston Martin? Let's start with the easy bit. The company was founded in 1913 in a small mews street in London, not far from, if any of you are football fans, from Chelsea Football Club. So we're in Kensington and Chelsea. We're founded in that mews house there by Robert Bamford and Lionel Martin in 1913. They produced their first car in 1914, and Lionel Martin used to like to go racing, and he raced up a hill called Aston Hill in north of London, Buckinghamshire, I think it is. And that is why the company is called Aston Martin, Lionel Martin being one of the founders of the company. We're based today, we haven't moved that far, we've just gone up the M40. We went up the M1 briefly to Newport Pagnell, which was what many people consider to be the historic home of Aston Martin. That's where the post-war cars were built when David Brown bought the company. So the DB24, DB4, DB5, DB6, all the way through to the first generation of Vanquish. And the last car that came out of the plant at Newport Pagnell was in about 2006 with the Vanquish. Today we still own that facility, and it's a restoration business for us. So if you're lucky enough to find in a barn a DB5 and you'd like to get it restored, we'd happily take it and we'll restore it for you. And it's about $715,000 to get a full restoration at the factory. So we're based up in Gaydon. This area of the UK, to the northwest of London, Jeremy and I were talking about this, has emerged as a sort of technology hub for the auto industry. So you've got something like 8 out of 12 Formula One teams based in this area: McLaren, Williams, Red Bull, Mercedes, and so forth. You've got a growing EV-based industry and a lot of suppliers around there. And then you've got manufacturers like ourselves, Jaguar, Land Rover, Honda make cars not far away from here. So there's a sort of auto industry hub in that countryside northwest of London. In 103 years, we've produced about 80,000 cars. So to put that in context, Toyota would make that in 3 days. So we take our time. And we're also probably arguably one of the most sustainable car companies in the world, because 95% of our cars are still in existence. So people don't scrap or landfill an Aston Martin, they tend to restore it and keep it. So of those 80,000, quite a lot are still around. We have 2 brands. We're called Aston Martin Lagonda. I'll get to the Lagonda a little bit later on. And we only have 1 robot in our factory. And it's a robot that applies structural adhesive to the bodies of the cars. And the comedians in the company call that robot James Bonder. You might know us from our racing exploits. We were once even in Formula One, but probably where Aston Martin got its name in terms of racing was, and this is a DB4 GT, was in Le Mans, as endurance racing. And we won Le Mans in 1959. And we still compete to this day. We compete with Advantage in the World Endurance Championship, including the Le Mans 24-hour race. We make all our cars, they're hand-built in England. I know England, Great Britain, United Kingdom, it's a little complex. England is one chunk of 4 parts of the United Kingdom. It's still called England even after Brexit. And we believe that's going to be the case. We believe that we made the decision to open a second factory in Wales before Brexit, actually. We're hoping we're not going to be in an import-export situation. We don't believe Wales is going to break away, but you never know. But we will have two manufacturing plants, and I'll explain what we're going to build in that second plant. And here we go. We have to obviously talk about James Bond. It's an association since 1965. We've been in 12 of 24 movies. The 24th movie was Spectre. And interestingly, the DB10 was built specifically for that movie. And although of the 12 Aston Martins that have, or the Aston Martins that have appeared in 12 Bond movies, they've all had some level of adaptation to them. You'll remember maybe the Vanquish in Die Another Day, which had the sort of reflective invisibility cloak and the machine guns and so on and so forth. DB10, we sort of reached back in history. It's a nice sort of parallel. 1965 was the DB5, the famous Goldfinger car, the ejector seat, the machine guns in the front, the reversible license plates, and so on and so forth. And so for Spectre, we wanted to build James his own car. You can't buy this car. We only built 10 of them for the movie. One went to auction earlier this year, fetched about $3 million for charity. And it was a fun project. It was built off a Vantage platform, but if any of you have seen the movie, has a few tricks up its sleeve. So quite a fun association. And for many people around the world, when you say James Bond, Aston Martin is one of the first brands that pops into people's heads. Likewise, you say Aston Martin, and people think that people think of James Bond. It's one part of our brand, and the balance is not being over-defined by only James Bond, because if you think about us as a business reaching a new generation of customers, particularly in emerging markets, may not have grown up with James Bond as a reference figure. So we're looking at other communication platforms to complement what we do. But we love James Bond. We love being involved in it. We never take it for granted. We hope it'll be an association that will continue long into the future. Talking of the future, and I'll explain a little bit more of this, but we are, as we look to stretch the Aston Martin business into new segments, in the market in which we play, we have a core model offering, so Vantage, Vanquish, Rapide, and so forth. But it's important for companies like ourselves and the Ferraris and Lamborghinis of the world to stretch and to always stretch. Sorry to make reference again to Honda, but you've just launched a new NSX flagship for your company, no doubt. My days at Nissan, we had the GTR. So every car company, Ford has a GT. Every car company likes to stretch the boundaries. And for us, the boundary stretch is a project code called AMRB001, which I'll get into in a minute. But mostly what defines Aston Martin, and you're going to forgive me if this next few slides feels like a commercial, but you're all looking rather wealthy tonight, so I thought I would take advantage of you being here captive in this room. What defines Aston Martin is a common, internally, a common love of cars and a love of creating beautiful things. And what attracts, and we've talked to our customers obviously all the time, what attracts people to Aston Martin and what makes the cars collectible is this timeless elegance, this timeless beauty. So it's super important for us that any time we develop a car, that the immediate reaction should be, oh, wow, that's beautiful. So this is the Vanquish Zagato, which we previewed earlier this year. There will be 99 of these built. They're all sold. I apologize, you're a little late. They're about 700. Well, actually, they've got a lot cheaper in dollars because the pound's taken an absolute dive post-Brexit. So it's bargain time. Come and buy an Aston. We're 10% cheaper than we used to be. So this is a limited edition with Zagato, which is a coach house that we've had a very long relationship back to the 50s with the DB4. And this sort of revives this art of coach building. So this comes off the Vanquish platform, but every body panel is new and different. It's got an uprated engine, and it's just a thing of staggering beauty. And we hope an instant collectible. And in fact, 10 days ago at Pebble Beach, we announced there would be a Volante version, a convertible version of this car as well, also 99 to be produced. It's also about attention to detail. And this applies in any segment of the luxury market. And in fact, you could argue that beautiful product, beautiful attention to design detail is really now expected in every segment of the market. And obviously, here in the Valley, what Apple have done in terms of product design, you would argue that you know, the form factors that they've created, the fit, the finish, the attention to detail. So our challenge is how you marry an increasing expectation for technology with this handcrafted, if I can call it, imperfections. So if any of you come over to Gaydon, to our factory, and you come down the line, you'll see craftspeople on the line. We have an open production line. We have sewing machines on our production line. We make our own seats. We don't buy them in from an outside supplier. We get the seat frame, the pads, the motors, and so forth, and then we hand make the seats. And the leather all comes from Scotland, from cows that are sustainably reared. They have a wonderful life. They roam in fields with no barbed wire fences, so we don't get any nicks on the leather. And we bring the hides and we create, and this is a selection of images from the DB11. So looking at new technologies for interiors, so that's effect there is chopped carbon fiber. So every panel is different because the carbon fiber, the chopping process produces a unique pattern for every single surface. So again, this is why, you know, the DB11 is about $210,000 base price. So when someone is investing that amount of money in a car, they want to see down to a millimetric level that we, as a company, have put a lot of care and attention into the product. This is the new DB11. I'll talk a little bit more about this. But big challenge for us with this car, because this is the first all-new car that we've had for a long time, probably over 10 years. It's an all-new platform, new powertrain. And when you move an iconic brand, which is known for a particular form function, forward, you have the weight of 80,000 owners looking at you going, I'm not sure I approve of that. We took the Owners Club, the Aston Martin Owners Club, who are independent from the company. We took them into the design studio quite early on and showed them DB11 and sort of, you know, the nodding heads confirmed that we were on the right track. Design should make people feel a little uncomfortable because you've got to future it, because people don't necessarily, we don't know what we want in the future. So the challenge with DB11 was to start a new direction for Aston Martin design language. And there, see another shot of the car. Just change gears a minute to talk a little bit about the auto industry. Again, forgive me if you know all these numbers back to front. We're arguably in an industry that's growing. We have a lot of challenges. So if you look on the top right, the macro trends, and probably I would suspect many of you are involved in some of these. How are people going to own and use cars or mobility devices in the future? Obviously, the guys up on Deer Creek Road and others that are following the electrification or the use of alternative powertrain technologies in all cars, in all segments, whether that's commercial vehicles or through to luxury and sports cars. Autonomous and connected mobility. Autonomy is probably the hottest topic in the industry right now. At the same time as this charge towards very enabled, very high technology cars, as, for example, markets in sub-Saharan Africa and some markets in Asia Pacific, as the middle classes emerge in those markets, the need for very robust, simple, affordable transportation that takes people off scooters and motorbikes and other devices and puts them into a safe car is also a massive challenge for the industry. So in my previous employer at Renault Nissan, there was probably more effort put into finding the alchemy that would unlock a €5,000 car as there was in developing advanced, developing the Leaf or something like that. Both were equally important because, you know, not everybody in the emerging markets will be able to afford the level of technology that the developed markets are expecting. And then finally, good news for us is there are going to be more high net worth individuals over the long term. So most of the predictions that we see, the reports that we get, show that the high net worth market is going to continue to grow. Broadly, wealth is moving a little eastwards and a little southwards. So that brings in itself some new challenges with consumers that have perhaps different expectations to we have in Japan or Europe or the United States, where we've had luxury cars for a lot longer. So the cars per thousand head of population speaks, in my mind, to the growth potential of the industry. You know, if India offer 1 billion, if China offer 1 billion population base, motorizes to just half the level of the United States, you can see the growth. Now, of course, the conflicting factor there is populations are urbanizing, congestion, pollution, so on and so forth. So this is where technology is going to be, I think, critically important to unlock this, and the integration of mass transit versus individual mobility is going to really come into play. And finally, where do you earn money? Well, the middle part of the market is pretty tough, actually. This is where most of the volume is. With the exception of some nice profit pools and things like full-size pickup trucks in the United States and SUVs and so forth, the mass market or value market is pretty bloody. I mean, the margins that a big automaker like Ford or GM are earning are in the middle single digits, 5%, 6%. A very well-run car company is achieving 8, 9%. The average for the industry is about 7% operating profit margin. In premium, and if we really get a little fancy, we could argue that there's premium and luxury. There's a separate segment, luxury, which is where we, Rolls-Royce, Ferrari, Bentley, etc., play in. But premium, BMW, Mercedes, Audi, Tesla, Jaguar, Land Rover, and so forth, you could see there that the profit on 12% of global volume accounts for 37% of industry profit. So when we look at the luxury market versus what we might call the everyday market, the trends that, frankly, technology has enabled pose an interesting question for us. So this is a slide that I lifted, a table I lifted from an internal presentation, because we were trying to get our heads around what really is the difference between luxury. Why would somebody pay double, treble, quadruple the price? You know, if you look at the price differentiation between a Ford Focus and an Aston Martin, it's a factor of 10. So why would someone pay 10 times the amount of money for 4 wheels and a steering wheel and 4 seats? Well, it's not only about the product anymore, and I'll talk a little bit about experiences in a minute, but it's about, so again, luxury being discretionary, it's about something that's bespoke, something that's special, something that I've created. We have over 4,000 people a year that visit our factory. Many are just coming to have a look around. It's an interesting place to you know, it's always interesting to see how people build cars. But a lot of people come to our factory 2 or 3 times because they come up and they spec their car. So they come up and they spend a day with us and they pick the leathers and the materials and they work with our designers to create their car. And then when it's built, when it's scheduled for production, we let them know and they come up and they can see the car being built. They can meet the guys building the car. Some people like to sign little bits of trim before they put in the car and write little messages to themselves. So, you know, that's something that you probably couldn't ask Ford to do, is to, you know, go down to Mexico and find your Focus on the production line and go up and interact and meet the guys on the line, because the line is moving. You know, they're building one car every 45 seconds. Our build rate is a little bit less. So the luxury business should enable that much higher level of interaction. You know, if you write to our CEO, Andy Palmer, his email is very public, and he will reply to you. So the luxury business is different, and it needs to be different because there has to be that value proposition versus the everyday market, which is increasingly, you know, disposable, you know, things we use and then we pass on, and there's a sort of distance between us, the products that we buy in the everyday market, and the companies that produce them. Whereas people that buy an Aston Martin or a Ferrari or one of the other luxury cars actually actively seek out that relationship with the factory. Aston Martin's history. So I'm not going to do the whole back pre-war period, starting in 13, because it was really we were sort of building in almost single digits. But you can see the transition of the company with some highs and lows along the way. There were various periods of different ownership. Ford Motor Company bought into Aston Martin in the late 80s, sold out in 2006. We're now owned by a combination of 2 private equity firms, and 5% of the company is owned by Daimler, by Mercedes-Benz. But you can see here with the introduction of new models, and particularly the big breakthrough for us was the DB7, which was the first of the new generation of cars developed under Ford's ownership, which was quite heavily derived from the Jaguar of the time, the XK8, and that enabled Aston to produce a modern sports car after the Virage series. And then the new architecture that really gave birth to the cars that we build at Gaydon was the Vantage and the DB9, which came in the sort of 2003, 2004 period. So to launch DB11 on an entirely new platform architecture, you can tell it's a big deal for us. So we peaked as a company just before the recession, built about 7,000 cars a year off 3 models, so Vantage, DB9 and DBS. We intend to return the company back to 7,000 vehicles a year for sports cars. And then we're going to do a few other things, and I'll show you the business plan in a minute. 7,000 cars for us is a natural place that enables us to maintain pricing at a healthy level, and allows us to make money to invest in the business into future generations of cars. But it's not too many. So Ferrari is about 7,000 cars a year. So by returning Aston Martin back with sports cars to about 7,000, we'll be about the same size as Ferrari. Rolls and Lamborghini are a little bit smaller. They're in the sort of 5,000, and Bentley are rapidly heading towards about 20,000. So we'll sit ultimately somewhere between Rolls and Ferrari and Bentley at the upper end. So we have a business plan. So I joined the company a couple of years ago, as did Andy Palmer, our CEO. We both worked together at Nissan. Andy took up the job of CEO and asked me then to come over and join him. And Andy inherited a product plan, recut it, extended it, and added new cars. So the basic business plan, which started last year, calls for the total revitalization of the current range of sports cars, expands the portfolio to about 7 core models, of which we replace. Those models have a cycle of about 7 years each. So what effectively you get is a cadence of the business that delivers a new car to the market every year. That's an all-new core car, excluding derivatives and Volantes and other models. So as I said, 7,000 units a year, which for our sports cars, plus crossovers and sedans. So that's the business plan in its sort of building block form. So at the center of the brand, as you would imagine, is sports cars. To the right, and if I go back, that car there is a concept car that we launched at Geneva last year called the DBX, and this lays out a direction, although the final car, which we're just finishing off in design form, will be a 5-door crossover, but we are going into the crossover market, which was a subject of hot debate within the company, as you can imagine, because Aston Martin's always been known as a sports car company. But this market is the hottest market in the luxury business. Bentley have just launched the Bentayga. Lamborghini will come out with a crossover. Rolls-Royce are coming out with a crossover 4x4 vehicle, as will Aston Martin. So you're all lucky, because in about 4 years' time, you'll have 4 wonderful luxury crossovers to choose from. Lucky you. We will reintroduce the Lagonda brand. So that's where we refer to a sports sedan. Unusually in the auto industry, where you normally find an absolute scrap over every single little market niche, in the large luxury sedan market, there are probably arguably only 3 players, which is Maybach, and I'm talking here sort of over $150,000, Bentley and Rolls-Royce. And we think there's a place for Lagonda to produce a beautiful 4-door car. That's going to be towards the end of our business plan period, so the end of the second century plan, but we think there's a place there to reintroduce Lagonda. So we have this 3-pillar portfolio strategy. We produce 2 special series vehicles a year. I'll get to those in a minute. We are going into the electric car business. We have brand partnerships and extensions, which are increasingly important for a luxury brand as you look to extend the reach to become beyond just a luxury car company, but to become a luxury company. And then the all-important experiences, which I will detail in a minute. A quick word about the DB11. So it goes into production this week. So we start making cars for customers this week. It's entirely new architecture. It's still a bonded and riveted aluminium, magnesium castings, carbon fiber structure. So we're not going into pressed steel. You won't find any welding robots at Aston Martin, but it is an entirely new structure. It's got an entirely new twin-turbo V12. This is not the Mercedes engine. We take an engine from Mercedes V8 that will replace our V8. That comes in time, but this twin-turbo V12 with cylinder DIAC, 600 horsepower at launch, is an entirely new engine for Aston Martin. And then we get, as a benefit of our shareholding with Daimler, an entirely, so the CAN bus system for the DB11 is sourced from Mercedes. So if any of you have been in Mercedes recently, the Star 2 system that runs the navigation and HVAC and so on and so forth is what is powering the electronics and electrical systems of the DB11. This is RAF, because it's still under military control. This is RAF St Athan. This is in Wales, near Cardiff. It is a soon-to-be decommissioned Royal Air Force base that we will build the DBX in. We were out of capacity at Gaydon. We took a look around the world. We looked at 20 different locations, including in the United States, Canada, Mexico, Eastern Europe, and so forth. And in the end, the Welsh government came along and said, well, we had this magnificent facility which was used, it actually dates back to the war. It was substantially invested in the late 80s to provide it as a service centre for military aircraft, and it even has a paint shop for fast jets. And it has 3 super hangars, and we will convert that into a car factory to build the crossover. It's a magnificent structure. It's 90 acres of military grade industrial facility. We get the keys from the Royal Air Force in April, and then we start the conversion process to building a factory. We bring 750 jobs to an area of the United Kingdom which badly needs employment. South Wales, if any of you know it, has had a pretty tough time with closures of steelworks and so on and so forth. So to bring car manufacturing to Wales is terrific, and there's a nice symmetry because we hold the royal warrant from the Prince of Wales. So Prince Charles was obviously quite happy that we are going to be building future Aston Martins in Wales. Lagonda. So you may recognise the car on the left. That's the famous William Townes Lagonda. Lagonda actually dates back to the pre-war period, and it had never been a particularly large volume car manufacturer. It was subsumed by Aston Martin, I think, if I got my history right, just after the war. The car probably that was most iconic is the one on the left, that was so far ahead of its time. If any of you know it, it had a very, very complex electronics inside, which 30 years after launch mostly still work. But it was, we're talking in the 1970s, so this was sort of a compatriot of the DeLorean, if you like. I mean, it was really such a futuristic car. Age has actually been quite kind to it. At the time, it was not quite as popular as the company had hoped, but there's now a sort of cult following for this Lagonda. The car on the right is a car that we are producing right now, which is a limited run, 200 units, price on application, and this is a modern interpretation of Lagonda and paves the way for a full series production vehicle, as I said, at the early part of the next decade. Specials. Specials are a very important part of the luxury business. All of the luxury car manufacturers produce these limited run, high volume, high price point vehicles in limited volumes, and it has become, I would say, something which has both been very good business, or is very good business for Aston Martin, but is also a great way of building new collectibles. So last year we produced the GT12, and they went very quickly. The Vulcan are very extreme, and in fact that is we persuaded, that's the last ever flying Vulcan. If any of you know your aeroplane history, it was it was Britain's, I think, first post-war nuclear bomber. Ironically, it only ever dropped armaments in anger on the Falkland Islands, which were at the time being occupied. It flew all the way from England, dropped its payload, and then scarpered off home. And they've now been decommissioned, and last year it flew for the very final time, and so we managed to persuade them to do a low-fly run over the Vulcan car. And we applied to the Royal Air Force and British Aerospace to use the Vulcan name. It's an epic name, and you know, if any of you have seen a Vulcan in flight, it's just an incredible thing to behold. GT8 this year, derived from our endurance racing program. Slightly more of those, 150 of those, about $200,000 each, and then the Zagato Coupe, which, as I said, we announced a few months ago, and then we have a Volante version that will follow it. A little bit about 001. So this is stretching us further than we thought we would go in terms of developing a hypercar. If you remember the 177 that we launched a few years ago, that was at a time considered to be a very stretchy car. We were interested, if you look at what Ferrari have done with the FXXK and LaFerrari, we wanted something that would stretch the Aston Martin brand. By happy coincidence, Adrian Newey, if any of you know Formula One, Adrian is the most successful Formula One designer in history. He's won more world championships than any F1 designer. So Andy and myself know Adrian from past dealings, and so we got together and we said, well, wouldn't it be fun to develop a car? And that is about 95% production accurate. Adrian believes, based on the simulations that he's done, that it should be the fastest production car around a track. So you can measure speed, obviously, in acceleration, which is obviously what our friends at Deer Creek are quite excited about with the new P100D. I think they're claiming the fastest accelerating production car. Bugatti, I think, claimed the highest top speed for the Chiron. We're going to focus on total package and total performance around the track. Predictions are that it should be as fast as an LMP1 car, Le Mans car, perhaps as fast as a Formula One car in race trim, one of the back to mid markers in the current last season. And the predictions are that the car in the right hands will pull 4G round a corner, which is double what we're currently capable of pulling with the Vulcan. Vulcan will do about 2G. I've experienced it, and my lunch also experienced it. This, based on simulation, should be good for about 4G. Going to do 150 road cars, 25 track specials. We'll be building them at Gaydon. It's a co-located team between Red Bull, Formula One, and Milton Keynes, and us in Gaydon, and it's appropriately priced. Let's put it like that. Here's a video. This is how we announced it, revealed it in front of our employees. So that's 001, and it was great to announce it in front of the employees. Normally, often the industry does these events in cool places, in cool cities, and so forth. We said no, we're going to announce it in a place where we're going to build it. We had all our 1,800 employees gathered there. Ricciardo came along and drove the car through the factory. It was a really fun day, and a very appropriate way, I think, to announce a car that has a heavy is derived heavily from Formula One inspired technology. I mentioned electric cars. You probably wouldn't necessarily associate Aston Martin with electric cars. A lot of the reason people buy our cars is because of the noise they make. So as my neighbours remind me every morning when I leave for work. But we also live in a world where, at a minimum, legislation demands us to produce cars with increasingly low emissions. And consumers are increasingly interested and desiring of electric cars. And currently there is no offering in the luxury market. Tesla is a premium brand, but there is no pure electric car available in the luxury market. So we have joined forces with LeEco, which is a Chinese technology company that also have an involvement with Faraday Future. And we're working with them on a limited run Rapide E, which will be a full electric version of our four-door sedan, which will debut in towards the end of 2018. It's a first step for us. We believe passionately in a diverse powertrain future for Aston Martin. We want to still produce large capacity gasoline engines. That's who we are as a brand. V12s, V8s, big brawny engines. But we need to have a diversity of offerings, as I said, not only for legislative reasons, but because also the market will increasingly demand it. So the Rapide E is a first step for us in that direction. Take a break from cars. As a luxury brand, we also need to do other things. And other things are experiences and are partnerships and what you might call brand extensions. So, for example, we do things like limited edition collector sets of special badges that were done for the endurance racing. We've created 249 of those and about $5,000 each. It's absolutely perfect for your study. So you can contact me afterwards if you're interested. Handmade in exactly the same place in the jewellery district of Birmingham, England, not Alabama. And this is where we make all the badges. Every badge, every Aston Martin wears two hand enameled badges, and these badges were created to reflect the flags of the nations where we go racing. Hackett is I think not so well known in the US, but it's quite a well known, predominantly male fashion brand, and we've had a long association with Hackett dating back about 10 years. And these sort of partnerships are quite interesting, and you'll see them increasingly with luxury brands as you seek to diversify your portfolio. Good for business, but also good for extending the reach of your brand. Experiences. So the shot on the left was taken earlier this year in Colorado. It's called Aston Martin on Ice. The shot on the right was last week in New Zealand, which was the new DB11. Again, Aston Martin on Ice. So we put on a couple of these programs every year where we invite people to come and just have fun. Basically, it's a unique experience to go and drive an Aston Martin with full driver tuition in a safe environment, but basically just having fun with large, powerful cars on ice and throw in a few helicopters and other things. And that's the experience business. And we do, and we will offer increasingly a range of experiences, not just for customers, but for people who want something a little bit different. So we're going to do next year a small curated trip to Cuba to go and look at the car culture in Cuba. We had a program where you could drive the DB11 in Tuscany. We recently did the press launch in Tuscany, and we extended it on, and we had a number of people. Some of the people who came had bought a DB11. Some had just wanted to come and drive an Aston Martin in Tuscany for a few days. We're taking a group of people to Japan to look at design culture in Japan. So, and we call it Art of Living. This is something that you're going to see increasingly offered by all luxury brands, whether that's watch companies, fashion companies, car companies, because it is no longer just the object that matters. It's the relationship with the company, it's having experiences, and it's the so-called money can't buy. You might have heard this phrase, money can't buy, which is a little bit of a misnomer because we don't offer these for free, as you can imagine. So how do we talk about Aston Martin? Well, the interesting thing about Aston is that it has somewhat of a duality to it. And not all of the luxury brands have this. Ferrari and Lamborghini probably more like us. Bentley and Rolls-Royce perhaps a little bit different. But we have a lot of fans. We have a lot of people that just love the cars. And when you're driving an Aston Martin, you sort of get this, and Ferrari owners get this, and so on and so forth. So there's a sort of appreciation. Jeremy struggles through a Caterham 7, and you get probably quite a lot of that. And there are fans of your car. Not many people are brave enough to buy a Caterham 7, but there are many fans of the Caterham brand, just as there are a lot of fans of Aston Martin, and they may become fans through James Bond, they may become fans through racing. They may never be able to buy one of our cars, but it's something, a bit like a Ferrari. It's the sort of, what would you buy if you won the lottery? Oh, I'd love to buy and so forth. And for us as a brand, it's quite important that we show that fan base respect, that we give them content, that we allow them access into the brand. But at the same time, we're selling what effectively is a very high price, very exclusive product. So we're having to balance our communication strategy between access, so bring people in, get them engaged, make them feel part of the family. They go to Le Mans and they wear their Aston Martin racing jackets, and they feel, and they're waving the flags in the grandstand. That's terrific. But at the same time, we're also selling a luxury product, and luxury obviously is defined by accessibility and by price. So luxury isn't for everybody, otherwise it's not luxury. I think luxury probably is one of the most misused terms in marketing at the moment. So quite an interesting duality. So we work very hard, for example, with the car magazines, because that's a great way to get people sort of through the eyes and ears and the seat of a journalist to experience Aston Martin. So it's super important that we get all the buff books engaged, but at the same time we need to do events and activities that are more exclusively just for our owners. I'm very passionately, personally convinced about integrated marketing and communication. So if any of you working in PR or marketing, we don't separate out the functions. As CMO, I run both. I see no sense, particularly for a luxury brand, to have PR over here and marketing over here. They should be integrated, because in the end, we're telling a joined-up story. And again, we call it the Goldilocks strategy, because we need to get it just right. A bit too exclusive, a bit too standoffish, and we might alienate the fans. And it's the fans that make our owners feel good about owning an Aston Martin. Too accessible and too open, then some of the magic comes off being a luxury brand. So again, it's a constant sort of fine-tuning, juggling act. So back to the horses. This is the final slide. I hope I've got another slide to finish on. Yes, I have. I don't want to finish on a slide of horses. So, Aston Martin, 103 years old, 103 years old, sorry. Wonderful history and heritage. James Bond, DB5s, Le Mans racing glory, fast cars, sexy designs, passionate company. That's all very well, but also we're living in this age where the very topic of mobility is probably now of more interest to more people than it's ever been before. Technology obviously is forcing radical change into the space, and Aston Martin needs, as a business, and we as a management team want to maintain Aston Martin as being utterly relevant for the future. So we don't want, and I think all of the industry should be focused on, we don't want companies like Aston Martin to become like the horse, just a plaything. Aston Martin should be pushing, should be adopting new technologies. That's why we're doing the electric car. No doubt I'm going to get a question about autonomous cars, so I'll leave that for the Q&A. But we don't want Aston Martin to become simply a museum piece that's admired from afar. We're never going to be a large car company, because we're a luxury brand and we don't want to grow too much, but we don't want to become a sort of archaic irrelevance. And so for us, this sort of image of a horse is a little frightening, because it spells, potentially predicts where we might go if we don't ensure that we're stretching the company and futuring where we need to go. So that's my walk through Aston. There's a beautiful shot of some Vulcans at the Aston Marina circuit in Abu Dhabi. That was taken in February, where we handed over these cars to their lucky owners. So if you remember last time you picked up your car, you probably just went to the dealership and the guy got the keys and said, sign the paperwork. if you spend over $2 million with us, we'll fly you to a Yas Marina circuit and give you 3 or 4 days of tuition in the Vulcan. Amazing car, a lot of fun. Okay, with that, that's Aston Martin. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Simon. I think we have time for just a few questions, and at some point, perhaps when the first really awkward question comes, you'll scratch your nose and we'll move the proceedings into the lobby where we've got some refreshments planned for folk. But if you'll oblige us with a couple of questions.
Far away, far away.
We've got a couple of roving mics. Any questions for Simon in the audience?
So you talked about how there's the electric car now that they're experimenting with as part of their portfolio of cars they're going to develop in the future. Is that just one car? Or they're going to be actually expanding that to offering electric versions of all the cars or a hybrid version of all the cars moving forward?
No, it's a great question. So the Rapide is not an experiment. I mean, it's a car that will go into production. So you'll be able to buy it in about 3 years' time. For us, it's institutional learning as well, and it sets the brand off on a path where electrification can be acceptable to our customers. And we're currently looking at our powertrain strategy going forward. So we're really looking at 2020 and beyond, and looking at really what of our 7+ vehicles that we'll have in the lineup, which could or should be electrified or not. And some may and some may not. And we also have to debate, we are having the debate internally over hybridization. I very much doubt none of us are fuel cell fans in the company. But certainly the adoption of, because what we don't want to do, we know one thing we don't want to do with powertrain is we don't want 4-cylinder downsized engines. That's not an Aston Martin. So we want big V engines, big V8s and V12s. We want electric cars, and then probably we're going to be looking at some form of hybridization as well. So it's really a powertrain. It's really a powertrain strategy that's now focusing, and then we look at the segments and see which of the segments that we're going into. And it may well come to pass that every car may have some element of hybridization to it. I doubt every car we make will become fully electric, but certainly I can see a diversity of powertrains spreading across our range.
Hi, got a question. So you talked about co-branding with 007, and then a bunch of other car companies kind of played in the space a little bit. There was a little bit of BMW, there was a little bit of Jaguar, there was one Lamborghini, and then they went out. So what, I mean, I don't know what the decisions were, but could you shed some light on like why Aston Martin has been in this partnership, why some people experimented then went away, or how does this kind of co-branding decisions are made and continued?
Yeah, sure. So it's not our decision. So the James Bond franchise is owned by, well, originally by Cubby Broccoli, and I think I've got my ownership history right, who bought the rights from Ian Fleming, who wrote the original books. And today is owned by Eon Productions. The last movie was put together with I think a number of different partners. Sony was the distributor, and I think James Bond is the longest-running movie franchise in history. I don't think there's another series. I don't think Mission Impossible or Bourne or wherever. Even Star Wars not up to. So Bond has 24 movies. In the end, it's their decision. It's not our decision. So as they look to each of the movies, they make a decision about obviously what the script is going to be and what products. And of course, you know, James Bond movies are famed for their gadgets. So there are watches and helicopters and all kinds of other stuff that are involved in each movie. And Eon and the distributors make the decision based on what the script calls for, what the director wants, and as in all motion pictures, what makes commercial sense. So in a way, you know, if we're right for the movie, Eon will talk to us and say, we think James should be driving an Aston Martin in the next movie. And then we say, yeah, okay, it could be this car or that car. I mean, we've been in the last 4. So Skyfall had the DB5, which is a nice throwback to the Goldfinger car. Quantum of Solace had a DBS. It was the one that was shot up at the start of the sequence, and Casino Royale, I think I've got that right, was the one where it had the defibrillator in it, and famously it barrel rolled, and the car was written off very early in the film. Just heartbreaking. But so net. I mean, it's a fascinating subject. It's in the end not our decision. Obviously, we love the association. We hope they love us. You'd expect me to say this. I think James Bond should always drive an Aston Martin. Hopefully, he always will. Yes, sir.
So I was very interested in this transition that you're in, and especially maybe if you can elaborate a little bit in comparison to the watch industry. Right, a lot of young people don't buy watches anymore. You have it on your smartphone, the functionality and so on. Yet the luxury watch market is the most profitable, I believe, it's ever been. And it's the biggest, one of the biggest exports from Switzerland and places like that, extremely profitable. It seems it could be similar, right? People won't buy cars in the future for the most part because they don't have to. But at the same time, there will be people buying Aston Martins and the like. But maybe looking at them more like jewelry instead of for the functionality. Now it seems to me you have more ambition. You don't want to be just a beautiful piece. You have emphasized this a lot, but you don't want to be just beautiful. You do want to have technology in there. Is that possible to go both directions? Do you think there's something unique you can be doing that the mass market will not be having? Say more about this, perhaps.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, we could probably debate this all night. I mean, yeah, the watch business is amazing. Someone was telling me the other day, Rolex make a million watches a year. It's amazing volume. And there are probably hundreds of watch brands, and the proliferation, if you go into Torneo, I think it is, or Watches of Switzerland, we have it in the UK, the number of brands is mind-boggling, and they're at every price point you could imagine. And yes, I mean, in fact, particularly in the collector car market, people that collect cars also collect watches. The two go very, very closely together. The luxury car market's interesting because, and with the 001, flick back to get the image, with this car. So these cars are very interesting because what we're doing here, and our competitors are doing the same, is creating new collectibles. If you could have invested in classic cars as a stock 10, 15, 20 years ago, today I think it's one of the best performing asset classes, if I got my numbers right. It's outperformed gold, it's outperformed, I think, maybe even real estate in some places. A DB5 you could have picked up for sort of, a couple of $100,000, now are worth $1 million each. Same with the Ferraris. The Jaguar D-Type, the one Le Mans, went for 20 million at Pebble Beach last, and it went for, I think, 15 million about 3 years earlier. So, yes, in a sense, this end of the market is about collectibles, and that's why we and our market contemporaries are investing in creating new collectibles. Again, I joked at the start, no one needs an Aston Martin. If you want to go down to maybe have to go to Whole Foods in this, I mean, that's a very extreme way of going to get your shopping. It's possible because it'll be road legal. But ultimately, these cars are bought as part of a portfolio. But we're also going into new form factors. So to click back to my image, here we go. So to the car in the centre, the DBX, this is going to be an everyday Aston Martin. This will be, do what you do in your Ford Explorer, just a little bit more comfortably and a little bit faster maybe. But so an everyday Aston Martin needs to perhaps be a little bit different in terms of, still has to be beautiful, still has to be powerful, has to be handmade, but it needs to perhaps offer technologies that are more closer to what is going to be on offer in the mass and the premium markets. So yeah, this duality again of where we take the brand. Again, we don't want as a management team for Aston Martin to sort of retreat into its little bubble, because we do think, and again, this is good business as well. I mean, what Porsche did and I personally think that probably Porsche is about the best. I think Porsche is really on their game right now. I think they're a terrifically run company. And if you look at where they were 15 years ago, they had a 911, the Boxster and the Cayman, and that was about it. And they didn't make many cars. But then they came with the Cayenne, and then they came with the Panamera, and now they've got the Macan. And they're building something like 200,000 cars a year right now. So they're quite a big company. But it's those cars that have enabled them to still produce amazing 911s. And I think you'd have to be pretty harsh on Porsche to say that the 911 is not a good car. I think it's an epically good car. So we are pursuing, in a sense, a similar path where we're going to have these more practical offerings that are going to have technology and perhaps electrification, hybridization. But we're still going to be, in the market to produce very exotics, and these collectibles. So.
Oh, yes, hi.
Yeah.
So a business question.
Yes, sir.
With a century worth of big cubes in gasoline, to move over to hybridization and electrification takes a substantial amount of capital. So would that be from the ground up internal design, and with a limited amount of volume, is that covered, or do you foresee partnering with somebody else, or shall Aston remain peerless?
Yeah, so the easiest way to explain that is to go back to so this business plan is fully funded by investment from our shareholders. This represents about $1 billion worth of investment to create this. Yeah? So to create all new sports cars, a crossover, invest into the future of Lagonda, some specials, an electric car. That's the second century plan, and that is fully funded. We fund the next generation, the business plan that follows that is funded, touch wood, from the success of this. So we are then in a position where we're generating cash from operations that we then invest into the future of the products. As it relates to technology such as electric cars or advanced driver assistance, mobility systems and so forth, it's one great benefit of having Daimler as a part shareholder in the company. It gives us access to their technologies, and we have an open book with Daimler. And we also attract other investors into the business as well. So the Rapide E, our electric car, is actually a joint project between us and LeEco of China. So they're investing in that, and they're bringing their technology. So you're absolutely right. We're a small volume car company. We don't have a giant R&D department. So we are reliant on outside investment from partners from the industry. The interesting part about our business is that for a lot of suppliers, tier one suppliers, we're a very attractive test bed for some of their very new technologies, because often new technologies are very expensive when they come out. If you're selling in the luxury market, you've got the pricing to be able to integrate that technology. So that's why you often see advanced technology debuting on higher end cars. I mean, the driver assistance systems that are now migrating into the mass market started off in Mercedes S-Class, Audi A8s, and BMW 7 Series, and so on and so forth, and they're now migrating down into larger volume vehicles. So yeah, so we also work with suppliers who are kind of interested to use us a little bit as a test bed.
So we actually only have time for one more question, and I know you had your hand up earlier. Did you still have it up? Then you got it.
First of all, wonderful presentation. Thank you. It was a great overview. And as a long-time Aston Martin owner, 15, 16 years, it was wonderful to see what makes me smile every time I walk towards mine put into this format.
Thank you.
Incredible. Question. As we think of the future and we think of a changing demographic, I think I once read that only 3,000 women have ever bought an Aston Martin. And is that, when we think of the future, whilst I know we're still focused on a testosterone-fueled brand, that embodies power, beauty, and soul, is it sustainable to be able to not be able to appeal to 50% of the addressable market? Women are wealthy too.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, it was my boss that gave that quote, and that's statistically accurate. So based on what we can glean from registration data of the 80,000 cars that we built, the first time registered owner, only 3,000 roughly were women. So here we enter, this is a minefield of a topic, so I'm gonna steer really carefully.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to reflect broadly on the auto industry, okay? In all the car companies I've ever worked for, and all the research that I've ever read, conservatively, 70% of all purchase decisions on cars are directly made or influenced by women. So from the industry's point of view, although you may not, particularly here talking to the women in the room, you may not feel the industry is talking to you. Actually, you are the dominant purchaser. So women actually, even if their name is not on the registration document, women effectively buy more cars than men already. Aston Martin, Ferrari, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, Lamborghini, and so on and so forth. Anecdotally, exactly the same. If you're a single guy and you're out and you want to buy yourself a sports car, okay, but what we get from our owners, and I spent a lot of time with owners, is that the decision to buy an Aston Martin is made jointly, and always made jointly. So you could argue that we're already appreciated by both genders. Yeah? In the future, there's a phrase in our industry called pink it and shrink it, which is a cynical way of looking at how the industry is trying to appeal to women. We have a female advisory board that Andy, our CEO, formed precisely to make sure we don't fall into stupid traps of rushing out and trying to design, in quotes, a car for women. Because if we've done a lot of focus group research on this topic. And yes, there are differences between the sexes in what people are looking for in a car. But actually, based on the research we've seen and looking at Aston Martin, there's actually more in common than there is apart. And I tell you, the biggest thing in common is the cars have got to look beautiful. Male, female, gender, whatever, wherever you come from in the world. And that's why, as a brand, the most important person in the company is Merritt Reitman, who's our head of design. Because if he F's it up, we're sunk, bluntly, because that's Aston Martin is about creating beautiful cars. And that beauty does have a demographic-less appeal from what we can tell. So I've tried to get you in where we are as a company and how we're thinking. We're not rushing off going, oh my God, what do women want in a car? Let's make a female Aston Martin. We're going to make Aston Martins. They're going to be beautiful. They're going to be powerful. They're going to be handmade. We're going into different markets that have crossover market, for example, and this applies to the mass market, and it applies to the premium market, and it applies increasingly to the luxury market. From what we can see from the research, crossovers and SUV market has been more strongly driven by women than it has by men. Elevated H point, a higher driving position, more commanding view of the road, a feeling of safety and security. So that's why this form factor has mushroomed across the industry, whether it's a Hyundai Santa Fe. I'm trying to remember mass brands now. Been in the luxury business too long. Who cares about mass cars? Those things, those other cars. BMW X5s, Mercedes MLs, Porsche Cayennes, Porsche Macans. Those cars, Range Rovers, all those cars seem to have, women seem to have been disproportionately pushing those cars more than men, I would say, and that's what we've seen from research. So the move for the luxury market with Lamborghini, Rolls-Royce, Bentley, and Aston into that sector, again, is responding to changing needs. And again, an everyday Aston Martin, you know, so it's not just the sort of, you know, in quote, the guy's car in the garage. Thank you.